I'd like to thank the queer community for your love and for inventing this genre. God bless you. Thank you so much to the Grammys. Thank you.
Family, it's your favorite queer radio personality, Anna Deshawn, with our queer news for today. And how could I welcome all of us back without that Beyonce clip from last night's Grammys? It's so good. Now, I want to make you a promise. We will continue to bring you the latest in queer news, culture, and politics. So if you are digging our intersectional take on the weekly, consider joining the Q Crew. The Q Crew is our monthly membership program we started to help us grow the podcast. You get weekly emails from me, exclusive interviews with LGBTQ influencers from across the country, and beginning this year, special behind-the-scenes footage too. With your support, we can bring you more stories celebrating our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and comrade communities. Now, for the news. We have a new podcast dropping on Tuesday titled Black HIV in the South. How did we get here? I really need y'all to listen, okay? A Black trans woman who was killed in South Carolina in 2019 is finally getting justice. Also, did you know less than 10% of the anti-LGBTQ bills passed in 2022? Isn't that like amazing news? Let's talk about it. Also, a Georgia community fights back against the homophobes, okay? And the Grammys gave us some queer joy. Let's go.
You are now tuned in to higher frequencies. We do this frequently. Turn your radio station to E3 for that decency. Listen to great music and the latest movement. Safe listening for anyone that's tuned in. Who you waking up to? Anna Deshawn, Q Crew and friends. It's that real talk. Online radio with the spins. You caught up in traffic, frustrated. Just check in with E3 to shift your vibrations and get elevated. That's queer radio done right. Choose to be yourself. That's the only way to live life, and that's how it's done here. Just know y'all tuned in to the greatest. Ain't no competition. We ain't worried about the other stations. Check.
It is so good to be back. I mean, like, really back with y'all. I really hope you enjoyed the feed swaps with the Bad Queers podcast and the Grown Up podcast. I really got a lot of joy of joining them for their shows, so I'm so glad we could return the favor and sweep with them on our feed. If you enjoyed what you heard, I encourage you to go follow those pods. And of course, I've included direct links in the show notes. Now, tomorrow is Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. Did you know that the South comprises of 38% of the population, but 52% of all new HIV cases? I'm clear that many of us don't know, and that we still have a crisis on our hands with HIV, particularly with Black folks in the South. I know I wasn't aware until I visited San Francisco for the 35th anniversary of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. It was that experience that inspired me to tell the story. This new podcast is a 4-part series, and the first episode drops tomorrow. We've put so much hard work into this project, y'all, and I would really love for you to listen. It's definitely a heavy topic, but so worth digging into so that we can live in a time with 0 new infections. And based upon what I've learned, it's possible. At the end of this episode, I'll play the trailer for you. I hope you stick around to hear it for yourself and that it sparks your interest enough to listen and tell a friend. A new episode will drop every week this month. Come on, Black History Month. I mean, I really can't wait for you all to hear this project. I believe it's pretty freaking special. Since this is my first episode back in 2023, I want to report on only good news. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. First, in South Carolina, 2 men are finally being charged with a hate crime and obstruction of justice charges in connection with the murder of Pebbles LaDime Doe, a Black trans woman. She was only 24 when she was killed in 2019, and family, we already know oftentimes justice takes a long time to roll down, but we receive it in this case, okay? And I hope it gives her loved ones some peace. Next, a beautiful story out of South Georgia in Ben Hill County. Dawn Clements had been serving as the interim superintendent for the school district for about 8 months. From what I've read, she's been doing a great job. Well, a homophobic member of the community decided to write a letter to local pastors. Great, right? Yeah. Where amongst other things, it said Dawn wasn't qualified because she is, quote, openly gay. That letter made its rounds and drove Dawn to actually resign from the board. Good grief. Like, what does her sexuality have to do with her service on the school board? Absolutely nothing. And guess what, family? That's how most of the community felt as well. The school board had to hold a special meeting on Saturday, and do y'all know what happened? They estimate 200 to 250 people showed up to support Dawn. They showed up to say that they could care less about her sexual orientation. They showed up to say her experience and care for the students is what matters to them. The board took a vote and unanimously voted no to accept her resignation. Now, does she choose to take it? We really don't know. But I do hope that she feels supported and loved during such an awful situation. Now let's talk a little about politics now. I've reported a lot about the anti-LGBTQ and anti-trans bills that have been making their rounds in legislatures across the country. It has been a right-wing orchestrated machine of hate. But do you know the good news? Because that's what I promised today, okay? The news, according to the Human Rights Campaign's recent report, is that despite the 315 anti-LGBTQ+ bills proposed in 2022, yeah, family, I said 315, only 29 of them passed. Only 29. That is less than 10%. Can we say hallelujah to that? Can we acknowledge how much worse it could have been? Can we say thank you to all the activists, advocates, lobbyists, funders, organizations that make it their life's work to protect human rights, to protect LGBTQ+ rights? Thank you. The report also goes on to say that 24 pro-equality bills also became law in 2022. How about that? We know the hate train isn't stopping, but neither is ours. Their hate will not win, period. And guess what? It's not winning now. How about that? Our final story for today is all about the Grammys. Beyoncé made history for winning the most Grammys ever. Not Michael Jackson, not Aretha, not Whitney, not Luther, okay? Beyoncé. She now has a total of 32. Her speech was beautiful, and thanking the queers, and let me be specific and say Black queer folks for creating house music. I love that. Then, of course, we have to acknowledge Sam Smith and Kim Petras for their win for Unholy. This win makes Kim the first transgender woman to win a Grammy in the category of Best Pop Duo Group Collaboration. What I thought was so beautiful in that moment was the crowd's reaction and support and love. I could feel it all the way here in Chicago. The Grammy streamed on YouTube as well, just in case you missed it. For my word today, I want to share a story I heard. Now, this past weekend, I had the pleasure of attending my second Equality Illinois Gala. Equality Illinois is the state's largest LGBTQ civil rights advocacy organization, and they also know how to throw a great party, okay? It was a sold-out event with 1,500 people in attendance. You know, this post-COVID world, that is a lot to take in, but it is something beautiful when 1,500 people are cheering in solidarity of fairness and equity and equality. This year's award recipient was Nadine Smith, the executive director of Equality Florida. Can you imagine what her job is like right now? I mean, Ron DeSantis is her governor. That man's work is fueled by nothing but hate. It's evil. But I digress and let me focus. In Nadine's speech, she asked us to imagine that the right-wing homophobes are a slingshot. They are trying to pull us back inch by inch, but we are actively resisting because we will not stop fighting. And she went on to say that even when they pull back that slingshot, there's going to be a moment when they lose, and that slingshot ends up further ahead than it was when they started pulling it back. Family, I can see the slingshot. And it is so exhausting to keep fighting. I know it is, but we can't quit. We just can't. We've got too much to live for. Hate will not win, but we will. Now, as promised, take a listen to the trailer for Black HIV in the South. How did we get here? And if you enjoy it, subscribe to the feed and tune in this month to the series. Till next week, family. Peace. There's no place like the Cube. Family. Black people in the South make up 38% of the population, but 52% of all new HIV infections. What began on the West Coast in 1981 has now found its epicenter in the Bible Belt. So why aren't we talking about it? This is Black HIV in the South. How did we get here?
So when I talk about HIV in the context of the South, whenever I present, I always start with this map from 1908. And back in 1908, the NAACP hired cartographers, map makers, to show us the rates of lynching in every state in the country. So it's a really remarkable map. It goes from lightest to darkest, and the darker states have the highest rates of lynching, that century leading up to 1908. And if you layer that map with the HIV map, as far as rates of HIV, it's the same map. So it's like we can't have these conversations about why HIV in the South, why is it so bad, until we talk about systemic racism, until we talk about the fact that this was the plan from the beginning.
In the beginning, no one knew how you could contract it. No one knew how quickly it would spread. No one knew it would devastate an entire generation. The fear was paralyzing. And the silence coming from the White House was deafening and deadly.
When our folks checked into the hospital, people of color and some whites, they were shunned. They went into these big hospitals, but when it came down to care, white nurses, Black nurses, a lot of doctors that didn't have specialties in infectious diseases would not care for them. Orderlies would walk away. That's what they were called back in that day. Orderlies would not go into rooms. They would push food in trays outside of their rooms, or they would push it far enough that they thought that the sick person can grab it or have it gravitated to them.
And so folks are getting trumped on charges because of their HIV status or because of a disease. And these laws really came about back in the 80s when the Ryan White funds became available from Congress. And the way that they wanted to make sure that states would get it was that they had to have a law on the books that if someone transmitted HIV to someone else, then they would be penalized for that or incarcerated. And so states came up with these really crazy laws in order to get funding.
Today, 40 plus years later, HIV doesn't have the same hold it once did due to tireless advocacy, funding, and science. People aren't dying at alarming rates, but the South is still in the midst of an ever-present epidemic. It's a preventable disease that doesn't have a cure, but it does have solutions.
We know where they are. We know where they congregate. We know, where they utilize their self-expression. Why are we not utilizing those same platforms to reach them? There were agencies that said, we can't reach men who have sex with men, but you took a grant to reach them, but then you didn't reach it because you don't want to go where they are. And so a lot of this is grassroots outreach.
We know that our work is only possible because we work in partnership with organizations led by people living with HIV who are making a lot of noise in southern states. And so our role is really to support them, hopefully to be a watchdog where we can, and to bring programming that is inclusive, that is affirming, and that is relevant to what they're really dealing with in their communities. And I think that's why this partnership works so well, because we know the South, we know it, and we know what people are dealing with, and we respect where people are and try to create these opportunities to amplify the work that's happening in these southern communities. That's how partnerships should work.
I'm Anna Deshawn, your favorite queer radio personality, and I want you to join me on my journey to delve into the history, economics, and culture of HIV/AIDS in the Black community. Through interviews and personal stories, my co-host Dwayne Kramer and I will explore the shame, the stigma, and the solutions.
Well, it's not just an epidemic. I mean, let's call it what it is. It is a crisis. People need to understand that it is a crisis in the South with HIV and AIDS for Black and brown folks. We have to save ourselves. We've got to be those change agents, and we've got to engage all of our people in any way possible to bring awareness around HIV, to bring an end to the epidemic.
Black HIV in the South is an exclusive production of The Cube. The show is produced by Latrice Sampson Richards and edited by Burden Mac Creative Studio. Follow us on social at The Cube app and check out The Cube to discover the best BIPOC and QTPOC podcasts. If you enjoyed what you hear, rate and review us inside your favorite podcasting app. This podcast is a production of E3 Radio, your #1 queer radio station playing queer music and reporting on queer news in high rotation.